Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. Hello, Mommy.
Yes, Mimi.
This is only our second podcast, which seems a little bit odd because you're, 5 minutes away from me. But I thought it would be a good idea since last time we podcasted, we really focused in on, your journey with breast cancer. We touched on a little bit of your music career. But one of the questions I get all the time, because people are always very curious about my background, and I love to embrace my Jamaican cultural heritage, but people still to this day get very confused and they're like, Chinese Jamaican? Really? That's so strange. And I know your whole life you've had to explain, yes, I was born and raised in Jamaica. And you get the look, right? You get the look where people are shocked that you were born and raised in Jamaica. So, I mean, growing up in the, not to tell everyone your age, but in the 50s, right, in Jamaica, what was that like? Because no different at that point in time, right? At that point in time, you're just where you were born, where you were growing up, and that lifestyle and that country was your own. So what was it like there?
Well, first of all, it's completely different from our lifestyle now. Growing up, we had a grocery shop, and we lived upstairs. Name of the street was Princess Street, and across the street was a meat market. So the higglers, which were the ladies from the country, they would bring their fresh vegetables and even milk, fresh from the cow. So it's not like nowadays it's pasteurized, but of course we would boil it before we drink milk. And the meat market, they would just kill the cows and the goat meat. And so everything was fresh. Everything was natural. And we, at the grocery shop, we provide them like rice, flour, sugar. So we kind of do, it's not an exchange, but we get fresh vegetables and meat, and they get flour and rice.
So it's like bartering, though, basically.
Yeah.
So and that was very common for the time. And to give our listeners and viewers a background, it was very common for, especially the Chinese Jamaican diaspora, to be grocery store shop, they call it,
Yes,
owners, right?
yeah.
That was very much part of the city culture. You were in Kingston, and so it was
Of
very
course.
common to have a shop.
It's not like the supermarket we have.
Yeah. So can you take
We
us
would-
through it, like imagery?
Exactly. Like we would sell a pound of flour. We'd have to weigh the flour, put it in the bag, and we learned how to wrap it. And then when we add, we don't have calculators, iPad, iPhone. So we had to use our brain. So I'm really good at adding things fast, even maybe faster than somebody can input in a calculator. So I'm, to this day, at 77, I still can add pretty fast.
Yeah, I remember growing up, your maths was always quite superior to what we would use with a calculator because of your training. And so how old were you when you worked in the shop? Because clearly you were already packaging the groceries and also cashiering.
Very, very young age. 10 or so we were out there selling, making a living. It was 9 of us, but we all did our share of being in the grocery shop and selling all the flour. And my brother Victor, every Saturday we're looking for him. He's sleeping on the flour bags. So he was pretty lazy, but
Well, as a child, as we know, he grew up to be a hard worker, but it's kind of fun to think about that. We kid about it because, of course, now we have the Wong Temple, we teach Kung Fu and everything, and we always kind of say the boys are a little bit lazier than the girls, so that you also were 6 girls and 3 boys.
Right.
And so I think I love the image of the shop, but how big was it? Like when you walked in, was it like in terms of size? Like, because I know people think Publix, grocery stores,
Right.
and these kind of places in their mind.
I would
It's more like,
say maybe 500, 600 square feet. And then you have the back where we would store all this stuff. But the front was really small. It's like like a square, half
an
a
L,
square.
yeah.
Yeah, an L shape. And we'll sell like pig's tail in the barrel and herring and mackerel. And I remember we had to put our hands in the salt, the salt barrel. And it was really down to earth, really selling the natural stuff.
Yeah, so for our listeners, again, because not everybody's used to Caribbean food, but pig's tail, by the way, is the pig tail.
Right.
And it is in a huge saltwater bucket, which is brining it, and it makes all of the food very nice, like all your rice and peas, your stew peas,
Well,
your
here
pumpkin soup.
they sell them in
like
buckets
packages
this,
and-
but
yeah.
we had it in big barrels,
Right, like
really big
several
barrels.
gallons, and
Yeah.
that's how you would store it. So you had the shop, and of course you were so used to getting, like you said, food from the earth. Everything was
Right.
natural, which is so different, like you said. I actually think now your stomach probably couldn't take some of the raw, unpasteurized milks and things like that. Sometimes like your whole like digestive system changes, but at that time that was what
We
the
just
norm
boil
was.
the milk and drink the milk like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I think that's amazing. And so, like I said, in the 50s, this was the life. This was a shop. You're a Chinese Jamaican family in the shop, having your own small business, and kind of outside of that though, because the Chinese Jamaican community was very tight knit, right? In
Yes.
Jamaica, you always tell me how you would sleep under the stars. You didn't bother lock your doors. It was
Right.
safe at the time. Very different than the Jamaica now, unfortunately, but. What was it kind of like outside of the Chinese Jamaican community? Because of course you're the minority in a country where it's mostly Black Jamaicans, but people don't know there's also white Jamaicans. There's different
When you
shapes
are
and colors.
born in Jamaica and lived all your life, you don't see people with different colors. Everybody is like the same. All the higglers would come. We never thought of them as black people. We thought of the people bringing fresh vegetables and the meat, and we were like good friends.
Yeah.
They became very good friends. But over the years, as Jamaica got worse, and then those who are, I call lazy, they start rebelling against anybody who was not black. And if you're Chinese or white and you're doing well, they would start rebel and start throwing stones or rocks. And at that point, we start realize how different things are. So it was years after that, you feel that separation.
Yeah, so the dynamic of the country changed with the
Quite a bit.
socioeconomic and
Quite a
political
bit.
situation. So we're talking
Right.
closer to the 60s now, right?
Well,
Where kind of there was all
Right.
that dissonance and there was an
Exact-
uprising. I mean, we're talking like people who've seen the Bob Marley story. We're
Right.
talking like all of that
Exactly.
political drama, and where it's probably born out of poverty.
Yes.
And a lack of resources for the community. Unfortunately, in a lot of these countries, third world countries, you have such a vast dynamic between the very wealthy
Wealthy, yeah.
and everyone else. And so it's not to say that they were blameless in rioting, looting, and carrying on, but when you have such poverty and such a lack of equality, this is what usually happens. I mean, we see this
Right.
in every country, not just Jamaica. So that was a
That's-
difficult time. So
Right.
that switch from just feeling like everybody's out to
Right.
many one
Right.
people, and then
Yes.
having this dynamic
That was a
of where you
motto.
felt a bit of racism. So can you tell me a little bit about that dynamic change? I know there's a lot of the slang and slurs like
Well,
come out of that time period.
in Jamaica, everybody was Miss Chin.
That's right.
Whether you were Wong or Low, everybody, they were called, hello, Miss Chin.
Yes, even to this day.
Yes,
When we go to
Miss
Jamaica,
Chin.
it's like, oh, I want Miss Chin.
Right, exactly. But, you know, like I said, when we grew up, everybody was nice. And as the years go by, like I would say 15, 16, 17 years later, then we start seeing the change. And in 1968, that's when I did decide to leave.
Yeah.
Because they were against those who were not black. And we would be driving and they started to throw stones at the car. And I remember one day, I bent down, I was near my workplace, and I had a huge gold pendant, and they just grabbed it off my neck. And at that point, I decided I'm leaving Jamaica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, was it also to the point where you had felt like a fear for your life and that it could become violent? Because were there violent things happening around you?
Yes. Prior to that, I don't know what happened, but prior to that, we lived among the black people like we were like family.
Of course. I mean,
Yeah.
and to be fair, it's not like every person in Jamaica, every
Right.
black person in Jamaica it was just where it became such a
And I
tense.
would say we had a grocery shop.
Yes.
We were in the heart of Kingston.
Downtown Kingston.
Downtown Kingston. Now, downtown Kingston is where all the riots and things happen.
Yeah.
Yet I lived, 70 years ago, where everybody was harmonious and it was very nice to live in Jamaica.
Yes, yes. I remember you always talk about, and we get a chance to meet with so many of your friends and family, and who you call family, right? Like, so
Right.
they're not related, but they're like family because they
Family.
live on the block behind you, in front
Yeah.
of you, and whenever you meet another Chinese Jamaican, no matter where in the world,
I
you have
think-
a connectivity.
I think all Jamaicans and Chinese people, we knew each other.
Yes.
No matter who it was,
Yeah.
We're like neighbors.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you describe sleeping outside or without your doors locked, that really paints a picture because
Yeah.
nowhere, I think even in the world right now, most people don't feel
Right.
that security. So that's a change of the times. And it's super unfortunate. But I know you have a lot of love for Jamaica. It's very clear because
Yes,
you've kept
for
so much
sure.
of the culture. I feel for a long time growing up, even though we're very Chinese and we have our Kung Fu side, all the family in Orlando has all been the Jamaican side. None of them speak Chinese. They all speak
Right.
patois. And so I felt very
We
connected to
keep
my...
the tradition.
Yeah,
Jamaican
because of your
tradition.
music and the food, and everybody knows Jamaican food is my
Food.
favorite. But
Yes.
obviously the music was such a huge part of your upbringing and your
Right.
whole Wong family. You guys were kind of famous.
Right.
So talk to me about how you all got started into music and why it became such a widespread, thing amongst the
Yeah.
majority of the siblings.
My love for music, I recall sitting on the windowsill, even at 6 years old, and I would sing my lungs out to all the people on the street, my neighbors across. And so I really love singing. Of course, my two brothers also sing. My sister plays the piano. So Byron Lee, which is the #1 band at the time, he hired Floor. So she was the first pianist. So music was always in my family. I would sing, Sonny and Victor would sing. We would take chairs, bang on the chairs like drums. Floor would play the piano. So Keith Lynn, who was with Byron Lee, would come to the house. It's almost like the band started in our household. So music really, my father, he would play the guitar and sing, "You are my sunshine," And we were going into bankruptcy, and he would still play the guitar, "You are my sunshine." I'll never forget that. So I think it came from our father.
Yeah, that love of music.
He loved music.
But were you guys classically trained?
Never, no.
So how did that become? Because you also played the keyboard.
Yeah, self-taught.
Yeah.
Self-taught. Have you ever seen a Jamaican that doesn't have rhythm?
Not any Jamaicans I know, but
So-
I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah. So basically, it was an inborn thing. You know, we were fortunate. Flora was musically taught,
Okay.
but when we, I think we were jumping the gun, but I would sit beside her and kind of picked up from her. So it was a natural instinct for
Now,
me.
so you're 1 of 9, but you're number 9. And
Mm-hmm.
so what is that age gap between, so Auntie Flora, who she was, again, one of the band members of Byron Lee. She also just was professionally playing then at that
Right.
point. I mean, what was that age gap? Because he's like, you're just following along, and your two brothers, Sonny and Victor, are right above you, in age. So they're
Right.
close to you in age. But then,
We're almost like 18, 20 years apart from, myself and my oldest.
right. So
brother.
that's a
Yeah.
wide range
Yeah.
of siblings you have there. And
Mm-hmm.
so I love the image of everybody coming into the Wong household to just jam.
Right.
And how there was so much musicality that came out to Jamaica. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that it's not just what Jamaican music isn't just one thing. It's not just reggae. It's all of the ska and all of the things that kind of came from it and built from
Right. It
and
started with ska.
yeah, and I got to talk with, of course,
Yeah.
Uncle Phil
Right.
before he passed away. Phil Chen, amazing musician, also in that era with you all, and
Well,
kind of gave me a little history about it.
It's kind of mento.
Mento, yes,
Mento, where they play with the box and they do this, and then we have the ska, which we dance like this, and then it progressed to the reggae, and from calypso, then we get soca, but it's the same rhythm, but it just changes a little bit.
Yeah.
But the same feel,
Yeah, I love it.
island feel.
Yeah, and I love that evolution because it really kind of shows that growth and evolution of the music over time. But people also don't realize how important the Chinese Jamaican musicians were for that era. You think Bob Marley. Bob Marley gets all the credit. He should get a whole heap of credit. But I mean, you guys, not maybe you personally, but all the musicians that you interacted with overlap with Bob Marley as well.
The first band, Byron Lee, was half Chinese. Keith Lin was the same, was a singer. Then we have Kes Chin and the Souvenirs. He was also half Chinese. Of course, the Mighty Vikings, my two brothers, myself, Ingrid Chin, and the Carnations. So it was primarily a lot of the Chinese were the band members, Of course, there were others and music producers were also Chinese.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize how
We
integrated
played a
it was.
really big part in the music industry.
Yeah, and I think, I remember growing up, being at music concerts with you and members of Third World and members of even former Bob Marley musicians.
Right.
You all knew. What I'm saying is you all kind of grew up together. Like you all kind of interacted.
Well, we performed with Hortense Ellis, and in those days they were the most popular singers that were on stage. So we performed with all the big artists, Toots and the Maytals. So we had great times, great musicians, and we've taken that earth music of Jamaican style and we even carried it back to America.
Yeah.
And we started the band, the version band.
Yeah, so before we jump forward into time, I want to hear more about the Carnations because it's interesting to me that most Jamaicans we run into, especially from that era, have heard of the Mighty Vikings, have heard of the Carnations. Most Americans have no idea,
Right.
what that really meant for the foundation of a culture that would then go on till today.
Well, in those days, like we mentioned, Byron Lee and Kingston and so forth, we didn't have an all-girls band. So Ingrid and her father, Kyung, was a brother of Kingston. So it's a musical family. And they decided they would form an all-girls band. So I thought that was interesting, and I said, I'd like to join that, even though sometimes I did special guest artists with my brothers, the Mighty Vikings. And I would sing To Serve With Love, Lulu, and those.
To Serve With Love.
So I decided to visit them. I joined the band. So I was a lead singer, I played the congos, Ingrid played the bass, Richard, now, he's also a musician. He played bass and drums. So what happened is, when we portray ourselves as an all-girls band, I would sit behind the drums, and because I can kind of fake my way through drumming. But when we actually played out, Richard would be the drummer. So we kind of said we're all girls band, but technically Richard was the drummer in the band.
He's an honorary girl. We'll let him be an honorary girl in this. And we'll get to talk to him one day too, because I think this is an important distinction. You always had said first all girls band, and I think it was mainly because
it was mostly girls.
But also in the front, right? Let's be real. At that time, and even now, there's still a struggle for equality amongst men and women.
Christine played the trumpet. And later on, Richard and Christine got married. And of course, they have Tessan, who became the winner for The Voice.
Yes, very
musical family.
Yeah, so, but I was trying to say, the equality between men and women was a dynamic. So to have like the women in the front and being like kind of the headliners and the ones that we were portraying, whereas most of the other bands had male leads, right? Most of them had a lot of male leads, and so that's why
mostly
it was so
men
important.
in the band.
And mostly men
so
in the
we
band.
had 99%.
Which was really progressive at the time, right? And so how was that acceptance, because it seemed like a happy time, but how was the acceptance among the community in terms of listeners and fans and things like that? And then how was it amongst fellow musicians and peers?
Well, not because we were female, but we played good music.
When you're good, you're good.
So we were asked to do special occasions, like I mentioned in my last interview, that when the Prince Philip, Prince Charles and Anne, they came for the Commonwealth Games in 1966. Our band was chosen because we were so unique. So there are advantages for being so-called all-girls band because we did that. We were also on the float for the Jamaica independence with Toots and the Maytals. We were chosen for that. So it pays to be the all-girls band.
Yeah, and can you tell me a little bit about what that was like? Because now, to be in the music industry, there's certain way to do it, right? You know, at that time, just word of mouth, everybody knew about each other. Did you have an agent or a manager that booked shows? How did you get gigs?
Was Kyung, our manager, who was, again, in the music business. And it's mainly word of mouth, and one hotel would hear of us. They would book us, the Flamingo, Havana, Bombay's nightclub. So it's a small community, and it does get around.
And how old were you at the time?
Well, I started at 16, and I left Jamaica at 21. So from 16 to 21, that 5 year, we're pretty much in the music industry. As a matter of fact, I just remembered, I also kind of played the guitar, and a producer from JBC I think his name was Desmond Elliott. He asked me to do a half-an-hour TV show. So I had a half-an-hour TV show of playing the guitar and singing, and were all songs that I liked. One of them I remember was 500 Miles, and which says I'm 500 miles away from home. At that time I was in Jamaica, but maybe I could foresee I would be 500 miles away from Jamaica. Another time, so last minute, he called me and he said, "Can you do an Hawaiian song for us?" So I went to the studio and I said, "I have no clothes, what do you plan?" He looked at some drapes and he took down the drapes and wrapped it around me, and there was Miss Hawaii.
And that actually kind of came into play too, because they wanted kind of an Asian-looking singer, probably. So
and I wear a flower in my hair.
Yeah, that kind of became your signature, having a flower in your hair.
I always wore a flower when I sang. Mm-hmm. That's funny.
And so for you, as a Jamaican, right? Because at that time, I don't know that you were like, I'm Chinese Jamaican. Like, yes, you were Chinese Jamaican, but you were all just Jamaican. But did your like Chinese cultural upbringing and just having kind of, like you said, not just being a woman in the industry, but also having biracial, like kind of ethnicity or identity, I guess at that time, how did that integrate with your music? Because you played all sorts of music. It wasn't just island music, right?
Right, like I said, I sang Petula Clark downtown. Mm-hmm. I don't think being Chinese influenced our music at all, because we didn't do any Chinese songs.
Yes.
So it was just being a musician. Mm-hmm. The songs that are being played on the radio, we would play. Of course, I remember Millie Small, My Boy Lollipop. I would sing that song. So it's what is at the time popular.
Like top 40.
Yeah, the top 40 of the, and all the reggae songs we would play. It has nothing to do with nationality.
Yeah.
Or the only time I realized my Chinese heritage are made aware of is that my mother would give me fried rice every morning for breakfast. It wasn't the ackee and saltfish salad, but fried rice every morning.
That's interesting, because ackee and saltfish is my favorite breakfast of choice. Okay, so you, for 5 years, how often would you jam, and how often did you have gigs? Was this like a weekend, every week kind of thing, or you worked at the shop and then?
Right. I would say maybe twice a month. It wasn't it wasn't a job.
Right.
It's when somebody needs somebody for a wedding, or the nightclub needs a band. Because remember, there are several other bands around. So we didn't play consistently, like every night. 1 month, we may play 3 times. Another month, maybe 2.
And did you rehearse all the time, though, and just
Yes.
So you did a lot of rehearsing.
I never forget the address. We would practice every week. And it's not only our band. Other musicians would come and jam with us. I remember Norris from the Jamaicans, other great singers would come, because that's a place where the musicians would get together and we'd jam. So whether we played out or not, we really enjoyed music.
Yeah, and did you also maybe jam with other groups too? So even if it wasn't your night out, you didn't?
It's funny, we never jammed.
Interesting.
Everybody came to our jam sessions. Yeah, that was the place for, and to this day, they still live there. And I think he may have a studio there now.
Amazing.
Richard. I think, I'm not sure, but I know he lives at the same place.
Right. And so did you also go and listen to other bands and stuff too? So was it like a weekend party thing?
Well, of course, the Mighty Vikings, the Vagabonds, Phil Chen was with the Vagabonds, and later Phil joined the Mighty Vikings. So yes, Byron Lee, of course, so other bands we would go. And in Jamaica, you don't have to be 18 or 21 to drink. At 15, 16 years old, I've known nightclubbing all my life.
Me too, because
Yeah.
that's the Jamaican heritage. When my mom, now we fast forward,
Right.
you moved to the United States, and those of you who want the long story, you can watch Preacher and Kung Fu Pioneer, because you can see how she came to America, and then her journey from New York to Boston, to
Right.
Orlando. But I'd love to jump to Orlando, where you did continue that music tradition. Fast forward to now, we're in the 80s. You started a family here. Your family was here, including your two brothers.
Right.
And so how did you decide to then start Version Band and come together to then create kind of that same small bubble of Chinese Jamaican, but like that music love and passion? How did you kind of get that started here?
Well, we all decided to move to Orlando. Once we moved to Orlando, we realized that we also need to keep our roots and to get back into the music industry. So we got together with other Jamaicans and formed the Version Band. People used to say the Virgin Band, but it's a Version Band. And we were all Jamaicans except one, which is Glenda, and she plays the keyboard. So just as strange, when we were Jamaican, Chinese were doing reggae. When we came here and formed a reggae band, I recall one New Year's Eve, some people came at the door and they said, it's a reggae band. And they looked up and they saw Chinese people, and they said, I'm not going to go in there. That's not a reggae band. But anyway, we convinced them to come in. And they were so shocked that we actually did reggae and soca. So thereafter, we became very popular as the Jamaican reggae band with Chinese in front.
It was definitely something that people were always shocked about when growing up in Orlando. For those that don't know, in the 80s, it was not really that diverse.
Right.
The American diaspora here, like the American culture here, didn't have a whole lot of ethnicity other than white Americans, and there was like some small pockets, right? And so the Chinese Jamaican especially, I feel like they always find one another. But it was really amazing to me growing up, feeling very comfortable around all ethnicities because of things like the New Year's dances, where it's like Black Jamaicans were like our family too, because
Right.
they were Jamaican.
Right.
It wasn't about whether they were Black or Chinese or
Right.
anything like that. It was just, what, you're Jamaican? We love the same culture. We love the same food. We love the same music. All of that brings us together. And having the New Year's dances, I want our audience to kind of understand, like, we're talking the 1980s.
Right.
And it was an annual dance for New Year's Eve. And it was a big production that became really, really popular. And
We at the band did everything. We promote, we set up the instruments, we decorated, we pulled down equipment. I mean, the band actually did everything. So it was hard, very hard. But we loved music so much, we still wanted to promote the Jamaican music, and the Jamaicans looked forward to every New Year's Eve.
And
dance.
it wasn't just Jamaicans. We had other Caribbean, Trinidadians,
Trinidadian,
and we had
Bahamians.
just kind of everybody coming
Yeah.
together, it was so much fun, and it's probably one of the things I miss the most.
I missed a lot. Yeah, I missed it a lot.
We missed it so much.
I missed the band a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And you guys didn't just play for the New Year's Eve. You would also have gigs here in Orlando, Florida. Somehow the Jamaican Independence, and then you have the Caribbean associations
Dances,
that
right.
would say, "Hey, we want to
Weddings,
have
yeah.
we want to have parties," and so they would hire you. And so growing up, I always remembered, like I said, you know, in the Jamaican culture, there was less barriers to. I don't want to use the word enjoyment, but yeah, we would go to the nightclubs.
Music.
We would go to do all these things.
Music
growing up.
always brings people together, no matter what nationality. And I think we stayed together like 20 years in Orlando.
At least because
Yeah.
you played in the 80s.
Yeah.
I don't remember what was the first year that you guys started, but it was very early.
Very early.
And then you played at my wedding, which was in 2006. So that was, you know, we spanned at least that
Yeah.
long. So it was a very long time. And that was probably one of the last performances together.
Yeah.
But it was really kind of a hub, right? It was really what brought people together, and it was just kind of one of the things that I find most memorable about my childhood, and being able to know that, oh yeah, we went to nightclubs and we went to this and we went to that, we went to these reggae festivals, and I think it was something super unique because I've always had an artistic side, which was kung fu, which was a little bit more. You know, of course, my Chinese heritage, but it was just kind of a different way of expression. But I always loved music, and of course, I get that from the Jamaican side. And growing up here, it was interesting to see how shocked people were always like, "Oh, you're Chinese Jamaican. What does that mean?"
Right.
And so, you know, because you also traveled and sang on the road in New York and other places
Right.
too. Was there now a huge difference in how you felt being on the road in America and then having your gigs in Jamaica? Was there another type of barrier you had to kind of break through? Like, what was that dynamic like?
Not really, because music is music. I don't think people look on singers and musicians as what nationality they are. They look at you as a professional entertainer, not as whether you're Chinese or black or so forth. So coming to America, I think it's more whether you can break into the music industry. It's not because of the nationality. Fortunately for me, that there was a half Chinese, a band leader, and he had a Korean singer, and she was singing opera, of which that doesn't go over well with popular songs. So fortunately for me, at that right time, right place, the agent called me and said, there is this person, Dave Ewan, who was looking for a singer. And because he was half Chinese, I think he also may be drawn towards Asian. I'm not sure. But he invited me over to Buffalo. And he said, come on over, you have nothing to lose, audition, I pay your way, everything. Adventurous as I am, I decided to take that leap. And I went there, I sang Perfidia, which is in Spanish, by the way. And I was a big contrast from the opera singer. She was very good, but he wanted something more contemporary.
Yeah.
So he hired me, and I was on the road with him for a few years. And later on, being who I am, I decided I would have my own band. So I auditioned musicians. Oh, I was at a hotel auditioning musicians. Who showed up but Duke Ellington and his band? And Paul and Mercer, some of them helped me audition the musicians. And of course, that same time, I went on the bus with them, and I went to see Duke Ellington. So at that time, I created my own band. and I had good people to help me, audition people, and then I went on the road. Later on, I went to New York Sheraton, and some Chinese people came in and said, "Have you been to a Chinese nightclub?" I said, "I didn't know there's a Chinese nightclub." So on my day off, they took me to Kung Fu nightclub in Queens. And they knew I was a singer, so they invited me up. I sang. I went upstate New York performing. I got a call, and they said, "Can you come and sing at the Kung Fu nightclub?" So I disbanded. I was having problems with the musician. So I disbanded, did solo act, and I think I was there for 1 or 2 months. And then Boston, I think I told you the story, was opening the Kingston nightclub. They heard about me in New York, hired me, and I went to Boston. And my first night is when P. Chan showed up with all the masters. And that's when I met P. Chan.
My dad. So let's talk a little bit about that. You make it sound very sequential and easy, because I just imagine the music industry being really difficult. But it just
Yes.
sounds like you still right place and right time, but also you kind of had a fearlessness. Was it
Yes.
because you grew up just following Nancy Flower on the keyboard and you never had stage fright? Did you ever get nervous, or did you ever like have kind of a fear of like, this is not going to work out? You just kind of jumped in and took every opportunity that came, and it seemed really natural for you.
That's my personality. I always look forward. I never look back. So every time there's an opportunity, I feel we should all strike while the iron is hot and just go for it. So when I was working at Warner Brothers, was only 3 months, and the agent called me and said, "There is an opportunity to audition." And I've always loved singing. And I thought this was a great opportunity for me to try. No harm. I can always go back to working at Warner Brothers. So I did that. Then when I started to form my own band, of course it was difficult. I knew no one, I had no contacts. But I feel in life and in America, the opportunity is there. If you work hard at something, you have a dream, and you feel, always think positive, it will happen. I have yet to not succeed because I think positive. So I wrote all the hotels, and I said to them, if you hire me, and the first day you don't like me, don't pay me. And that's how I get my foot in the door. You gotta try me first. And they are willing to try me because I was willing to go and not get paid if they didn't like me. And that's how my career for my own band started. When I went to New York Sheraton and I worked there, and then I was having problem with musicians, and then the Kung Fu nightclub called me. I said, here's my opportunity. Another road, another avenue is taken there. So I jumped at that. Then it leads me to Boston. Then Boston, I met my future husband. So I feel in life, you go with the flow and things will happen for you.
Yeah, and were you homesick when you came here? Because you were only, what, 21, you said?
21. I had my first 21st birthday in Buffalo, New York, the first band.
Quite a different climate than Jamaica.
No, like I said, the lifestyle and everything. But I guess I'm like, what's that lizard, chameleon? Yeah, I can change,
Adapt.
adapt very easily.
Did you feel like when you moved to Orlando and you were surrounded again more by your family, like less homesick? Or that you
It
had
was good.
reconnected with
It
your
was good
roots?
to reconnect with all the Jamaicans, and also, you know, I had you and Pui and Tina. I had my own family. I had my Jamaican family. So I had it all at the time I moved to Orlando.
Yeah, and that was so you spent maybe like 10 to 15 years like on the road and
Yes.
and building that life and experiencing those things before you finally kind of
Yeah,
made your
and
way
it
here.
was a very hard, but exciting, interesting. If I look back when I was born, I would never believe what I'll be doing. And now at 77, I'm looking back. It's hard to imagine what I did.
I know, because we really just scratched the surface on some
Yeah.
of these stories and some of these adventures. I mean, thinking about all of your performances, are there a few that really stick out? I mean, you've mentioned a couple of them here with us, but are there a few that really stick out as like either being memorable because I hear a lot of artists say like they were just in the zone and it's just everything came together musically, or the performance was the most fun, or the audience was the best, or just are there performances in your mind that really stick out as ones that you'll always think of as not your favorites per se, but you know, really memorable and that you just you'll never forget?
Well, the person, not really, but the person who was my mentor was Carmen Caruso.
Yeah.
And I will never forget what he told me, because I used to, of course, everybody's insecure. You're not the best singer, you're not the best entertainer, and so forth. And he said to me, always remember, when you are on stage, those people looking at you are not the ones on stage. They're here to see you. So there's a reason for you to be on the stage, because your audience is actually here because of you. So I'll never forget that. And it helps me to be more secure why I'm on stage, why I'm entertaining. And I've always loved being entertained. As a matter of fact, I regard myself more as an entertainer than a singer. Like Frank Sinatra, he is more of a storyteller than a singer. You can see the difference, understand? So you have to take your best and do your best of what you're good at and expand on it. So I felt I'm a good entertainer, so I expanded on that. I can be on stage and I know how to get to the audience, not necessarily by singing, but being a good entertainer.
Yeah, and that's carried over in so many different facets, because you did emceeing for all of the Walam Kung Fu shows and things like that.
China.
And spun in China, and also even in like commercials
Tournaments.
and yes, but
Yeah,
I think it's always interesting a skill set we build as somebody, as a youth, as a child, but also then, you know, in terms of professionalism, you're able to take that skill and apply it to so many things,
Right.
which I think is always really, really useful, because of course my Kung Fu is what I consider, I apply that to everything I do, whether it's activism or whether it's running a business or whether it's like teaching. So it
starts from the basic.
you get like a foundation. And so I think it's been, you know, decades now of you having all this musicality, and you even carry that over into like community work, because you sang with church, and you know, you're always trying to use that skill to be able to reach out to people and as an expression. So what does music, and in that art form, like what does it really mean to you? What would you say is the most meaningful part of music for you?
I think music brings everybody together. It changes moods. So if you're sad, you can listen to a happy song. People who are depressed or whatever, music changes your whole being. So like when I do Tai Chi, I play certain songs that put me in the mood. So music on a whole, I think, helps to lift you up, change your mood, and makes you, at the time, who you are. My love for music will always be there. I miss it a lot with the band, but I still to this day put on my soca music and dance by myself. So it puts me in a mood. You want to exercise, just put on some soca music, do your exercise. So that's what music means to me. It puts me in the mood I want to be in.
Yeah, I think it's such an important part of so much of our lives, and we don't really think about it in that way, and I love that connectivity. So, all right, we will probably pick this up another time so that we can kind of really go a little bit deeper, maybe talk to some of your former bandmates and kind of have a reunion. I think it's so important to capture and share these stories because we don't want them to be lost, right? We want to remember our heritage, but also remember that the lovely Jamaican music that you hear today, even on the radio, the contemporary, it all started somewhere. And it started with a lot of the, not just Chinese Jamaicans, Black Jamaicans, the Jamaicans in Jamaica jamming in a living room sometimes, and or on the street corner, or just having a good time. It all started somewhere, and I think it's so important for us to always connect that back and to remember that, you know, there are people that have come before us that have really planted that seed, and unfortunately so many of them are gone now, and we miss them dearly. But since there are so many of them that are still with us, like you mentioned, of course, the amazing Tessanne Chin and her family, and that she didn't just come out of nowhere.
Right.
There is a long line,
generations
of the whole family being musical, and so I think people don't even realize that, and they don't know how much beauty and music and art has come out of Jamaica and where it all started. So thanks for sharing that, and we will be back with Margaret, Suzy, Wong, Chan. I'm sure another time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary.